Yo, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 33 of the First and Foremost Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Covington.
What's up? What's up? I'm Quinton Douglas, the one and only.
And we back at it again, once again. Quinton, how you doing?
I'm doing great, bro. How about you?
I'm doing all right, man. Been working all week. Got a game tonight, so I'm just trying to chill out for a little while.
No doubt. Yeah, we both got high school football playoff games, so I hope it's a good competitive game and not a blowout.
My game should be. It was a 20-point. It was Ravenwood beat Franklin by 20 in the regular season, but that was like September 4th when they played. So we'll see.
Haywood and Dyersburg got canceled the first time because Dyersburg had COVID cases. Out of 10 games this year, I probably only actually covered like 5 or 6.
No, I done
So it's been crazy.
I done maybe 7 or 8, something like that. But it's a different game every week though. So
right, you do different schools, yeah, for sure.
Man, we got some great topics today, so let's go ahead and get started.
All right,
so last few days there's been some hot NBA rumors, including the Suns discussing a trade for Chris Paul, James Harden, talking about trade, and Westbrook wanting out. So Quinn, give me your thoughts on all of those situations.
Yeah, so I mean, first the CP3 situation. I would think that the OKC Thunder are leaning towards rebuilding. Looking at they lost Coach Billy Donovan to the Chicago Bulls. They could be losing a big free agent with a guy like Danilo Gallinari. And you have to think they're ready to turn the keys over to guys like Dennis Schroeder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and not to mention they got all those first-round picks from the Paul George trade. But looking at CP3, he has 2 years, $85 million left on his contract. He was actually very effective last season. He averaged 17.5 points, 7 assists, second team All NBA. Of course, he led the Thunder to the first round of the playoffs. I think if you put him on that Suns team in the first round, that they would have beat that Houston Rockets team. Looking at, what Devin Booker brings to the table. You got DeAndre Ayton in the middle, who's a future all-star. And then Mikal Bridges is one of the better young perimeter defenders in the league. And then, of course, Chris Paul actually played with Monty Williams the 2010-2011 season in New Orleans. So you already have a perfect fit there. And you have to think the Suns are being pretty aggressive given they're about to have $200 million renovations on their arena. They had a $40 million practice facility. And they went 8-0 in the bubble, in case you forgot. They had a lot of momentum. Of course, Devin Booker went crazy. He had that game-winning shot. And CP3 gives them that established veteran leader at the point guard position that you need when you're trying to grab a playoff spot. And, the Suns have they've tried to replace Steve Nash since he's left town. They've had Goran Dragic, Eric Bledsoe, a lot of guys. So, CP3 will finally give them that point guard that they need. And then looking at the Westbrook situation, I didn't expect it to go south that fast. But, what did they expect? Westbrook knew it was James Harden's team. James Harden wasn't going to play off the ball. So Westbrook should have known he was getting himself in that situation to begin with. But at this point, if he does get moved, I say his best bet is the New York Knicks. I can't think of a contender that needs someone like Russell Westbrook, considering how ball dominant he is. And there's still $130 million left on his contract. But unfortunately, I am a Russell Westbrook fan, but I think his best chance at a ring was 2016 when they blew the 3-1 lead to Golden State when he was still with Kevin Durant. Because clearly Houston is trending down in the Western Conference. If they made the playoffs next year with their current team, they may get the 7 or 8 seed. But the team just isn't constructed to win a championship. And of course, Daryl Morey and Mike D'Antoni are no longer in town. So I think a Russell Westbrook move is all but done at this point.
So I'm gonna start with Westbrook. For me, I'm a Westbrook fan too. You know I am, and everybody knows I'm a Westbrook fan. But for me, I like you said, I don't know of a contender that really needs Russell Westbrook. And like you said, I think his best bet will be maybe New York, or I recently, I think over the last couple of days, I've seen some interest from Charlotte as well. I don't know if he want to go there, but with Russell Westbrook, I mean, you know what he brings. He's not a great shooter, but he does everything else at a high level. He was averaging 27 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and was shooting a career high 47% from the field before play got suspended. I don't believe it's more of a fit problem. I think, I saw something where Westbrook said he was concerned about the direction that the franchise was going in. And I also read about, Steven Silas, and they were going to double down with the small ball, and the small ball proved ineffective come playoff time when they matched up with the Lakers. So I think that played a part into it as well. I don't think more so it was Harden or his role, but that's what has been reported, his role. So it's gonna be interesting to see what Westbrook does, what they do with Westbrook. Like you said, $130 million left on his contract, and he's turned 32 years old yesterday. So, as a fan of Russ, I just want to play out his last years, how many ever years he has remaining. Just want to be able to play those years at a high level, in a good situation, whatever thinks is best for him, basically. But for the Phoenix Suns, I really don't like them trading for CP3. And my main I have several reasons. I have more reasons why I don't want them to trade for him. I only have a couple reasons why they should. Potentially you could elevate the Suns to a playoff team for the first time in 10 years, but, they're not going to be a contender. They're not going to be better than Denver. They're not going to be better than the Lakers. They're not going to be better than the Clippers, I don't believe. So, you could elevate them to, 5, 6 seed, but, are you really going to sacrifice, future assets and, great young players for being a 5, 6 seed? I wouldn't do it. Chris Paul, he did play well. He played great last year. He was relatively healthy, which is he hasn't been healthy, for a full season for a while. The last couple seasons he's missed at least 20 games in all those seasons. Last year he only missed 2. He's owed $41 million next year and $44 million in 21-22, and that's a player option. And when you're thinking about it, a trade package could include Ricky Rubio, more than likely Kelly Oubre, who's in the last year of his deal, and possibly the number 10 pick could be in play. He'd be an instant upgrade over Ricky Rubio, an exponential upgrade over him, but I'm not doing that for a 35-year-old Chris Paul. And then if you do that, you wouldn't have cap space for the 21-22 season as well. And so I'm just not doing it. If you think about the teams you got to contend with, like I said, you got the Lakers, the Clippers, you got Denver, Golden State, you got Houston, Dallas, Portland, Memphis, New Orleans, Sacramento. Basically, the Western Conference outside of San Antonio, you have to compete with those. And you pretty much know what the top 4 or 5 seeds is going to be. And you pretty much compete with the rest of those teams that competed in the bubble for the AC. And, Chris Paul, could he possibly put them over the top? Yeah. But I think people were fooled by the way they played in the bubble, because if you think about it, a lot of those teams rested. When they beat Miami, Jimmy Butler didn't play. I don't even think Jimmy Butler played.
No.
There was when they played the Thunder, Chris Paul played 20 minutes. Steven Adams and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Danilo Gallinari, they didn't even play. So a lot of those games they won against teams that were resting. And so, that 8-0, I didn't really put too much weight on that 8-0.
No.
For me, if I'm Phoenix, I'm not making that trade. I know Chris Paul he's still playing at a high level. Like you said, he was second team All-NBA, but that's too much to give up for a 35-year-old point guard. That's only gonna put you in playoff contention, not championship contention.
Well, I mean, even if they kept Kelly Oubre, Rubio, and that 10 pick, I still don't think, they'd be a championship contender. But I think if they could trade those pieces, get Chris Paul, you still got cap space. You could add somebody. Like I said, Gallinari, he's about to be a free agent. Just somebody who could add another scoring punch or defense, whichever route they go. I think they could maybe be a 6 seed. But, like I said, even if they don't get CP3, the next 2 or 3 years, I don't think they be any better than what he'd be able to provide them over that time frame.
If I'm Phoenix, I'm actually going after somebody like Fred VanVleet, a younger point guard, and I think that might would even put them in playoff contention, and without having to lose, Kelly Oubre, and then you may be drafting a solid player with the 10th pick, and keeping Mikal Bridges and Ricky Rubio, you could do whatever you do with him, but you basically trading away some valuable assets to be in playoff contention. And if you're gonna do that, you want to be in championship contention. And so I wouldn't. That's why I wouldn't make the move.
I'm a big Fred VanVleet fan, but I think for that team, I don't think he's consistent enough to provide, that leadership and that playmaking ability that they need at point guard. I just see him as more of a scorer. I think he could go somewhere. He's going to want to go somewhere where he's more of a focal point on the offensive end, and he's going to want a bigger long-term deal too. So
one thing we didn't get to was the Harden thing too. I also want your thoughts on that, James Harden.
I think they're both out of Houston, even though he said he's committed to them long term. Like I said, and you mentioned it too, Houston as a whole, they're just trending downward in the Western Conference. The way they built that team over the last few years, that's not going to be something that's going to be fixable in the next season or so. And James Harden isn't getting any younger. He's not going to want to waste prime years trying to rebuild a roster that they know isn't going to win the championship in that conference. Because like we said, the Lakers are still there. You have to expect the Clippers to come back. The Warriors are going to be healthy. The Nuggets, they're going to be a problem. The Mavericks, they could add somebody. The Trailblazers should be healthier this season. And, of course, the Jazz, Grizzlies, the list goes on. But, I just don't think he'll stay around in Houston much longer.
I think if you trade Russell Westbrook, then you got to trade James Harden as well. Like you said, he's not
Exactly.
going to want to be. He's not going to want to be around for a rebuild. And he's been linked to Philly, and I think maybe if Philly would listen, you might could trade him for Ben Simmons straight up. But if not, I'm thinking Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, and possibly a couple picks that should get it done. If not, like I said, if not for Ben Simmons straight up. I also, I was reading a couple articles, and I saw something about Denver maybe sending Will Barton, Gary Harris, and Michael Porter Jr., possibly like a pick or two. I don't know if that would get it done. And I was listening.
I'll go ahead.
I was listening to Jay Williams of ESPN earlier this morning. He said something about Brooklyn, trading, Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert. So those are really the only places I've heard for James Harden. So it's gonna be interesting to see, over the coming weeks before the season, the NBA season starts, and it's rapidly approaching. A little more than a month away.
No doubt. And of course, the draft's next week too.
Yep. So, like it's shaping up to be a short but interesting off season for the NBA.
No doubt, no doubt.
But let's move on to our second topic here. College football. There's been a bunch of canceled games. But overall the product has been pretty good. There's been some good games that have been on over these last couple months. And, the college football playoff will be here before we know it. So with that being said, Quinn, let's start with our picks and start off with 4.
All right. So right now at the 4 seed, I'm still going with Clemson. You have to look at they don't have Trevor Lawrence right now, which they should be getting him back after this week off. Um, they don't have a lot of key pieces on defense, which we clearly saw that against Notre Dame. But still looking at that team, Trevor Lawrence is already a lock. Is probably the number one pick in next year's draft. Travis Etienne is the best running back in the nation with what he brings to the table on that offense. Like I said, they'll get Trevor Lawrence back. And they'll probably get another shot at Notre Dame down the line in the conference championship game if they win out. So if they're healthy for that game and can beat Notre Dame, I think, we could arguably see two ACC teams in the college football playoff.
For my 4 seed, I got the Florida Gators after an impressive victory over a top 5 team in Georgia. And I think in order for them to get to the playoff, they would have to win out and beat Bama in the SEC championship. I don't believe that the committee is going to allow a 2-loss SEC team in, no matter how good they are. And the loss against Texas A&M hurt greatly. And I think Texas A&M is, I would have them at 5 or 6, but their loss hurt greatly. Maybe if they would have won undefeated and then lost to Bama, then I would see the argument. But I don't believe the committee's going to allow a 2-loss team in, regardless of what conference.
No.
So who do you have for number 3?
3, I got the team that beat Clemson. I'm going Notre Dame. Of course, you can't ignore the fact that Clemson didn't have Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. But Notre Dame showed they're physical, their offensive line. They got a lot of veterans up there. They're stout up front. Of course, you think of Notre Dame. You think of Zach Martin, Quentin Nelson, Ronnie Stanley. They still got guys like that they're churning out. Ian Book, their quarterback, he wasn't asked to do too much. The running game, like I said, that O-line blocked well. Ian Book, his legs were probably his best weapon, considering he made some timely plays with his legs. So I got Notre Dame as the third best team.
At number 3, I actually have Clemson. They're obviously one of the 4 best teams in the country, and they were without the potential number 1 pick in Trevor Lawrence. But I think, Clemson obviously can't suffer another loss if they want to get in. And I think they would have to beat Notre Dame in the ACC championship to get in. I don't think Clemson with 2 losses is going to get in because, quite frankly, outside of those 2 teams, the conference isn't good. I know North Carolina is ranked pretty highly, but outside of those 3 teams, the conference really isn't good. And week in and week out, we see that the competition isn't much. So I think they have to win. Clemson will have to win out to get in.
I think they will win out.
So what do you got for number 2?
I don't think they even have anybody really notable left on the schedule that I saw. But my 2 seed, I'm rolling with my squad, Ohio State. We cruising in the Big Ten right now. I know we don't have any competition, but you can't blame who they put in front of us. Our offense has been highly efficient. Justin Fields looks like he's playing against air out there. He's making the case for top QB in the country. Looking at his stat line, he's averaging 300 yards a game, passing yards, 11 touchdowns to 0 interceptions, and his 96.2 quarterback rating is first in the country. And I didn't even mention he's completing 87% of his passes. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are dynamic on the outside. We got all the freshman receivers they're contributing early, arguably catch of the year already by one of them that you wouldn't pay respect to. And, of course, we just got to see if we can run the ball, and we need more playmaking on defense, but we're second best team in the country right now.
I don't have you in the top 4. You simply haven't played enough games, but that's just my opinion. At number 2, I have Notre Dame. They beat arguably the best team in the country without, their quarterback, but they did bring in a 5-star QB. That's his backup. So, they, like you said, they showed they were physical. They did what I expected them to do. And I think for Notre Dame to get in, I would say obviously the first path is to win out. But I think possibly
Mm-hmm.
they could. I think possibly they still could get in, even if they
Yeah, I
lost.
think so.
Even if they lost to Clemson in the ACC championship game. But I think my only caveat was that with that is that they could not be blown out. If they get blown out by
Yeah.
Clemson, I don't think they get in. But if they
They might
lose,
put in Texas A&M over them at that point.
just gonna say, if they lose by 5 or 6 points, then okay, and,
Mm-hmm.
But I think either win out or lose by a slim margin in Clemson ACC championship. I think that is their path to getting in. So Quinn, who do you have at number one?
Right now, I think Bama's still, holding the title as the best team in the country, and with the best resume. Of course, they dominated Texas A&M. Their win is starting to look better with how Texas A&M is playing. They easily beat Georgia. Of course, Georgia's highly ranked. Mac Jones is, he's made a case to be the best quarterback in the country this year. He's really surprised a lot of people. And, just looking at the way he throws the ball, he's been really effective. And Najee Harris has been a monster himself in the backfield. So, of course, like we said, they're missing Jalen Waddle. I don't think they'll really see any effects of that until late in the season, maybe in the college football playoff. But other than that, they should still be able to score with the best of them.
I also have Bama at number one. I mean, they look like the best team, in my opinion, in the country. And I think they could even get in with a loss in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like you said, Mac Jones has played out of his mind. The deep ball is one of the best I've seen in college. Devontae Smith is looking like the best wide receiver in the country. Najee Harris is balling out. He's scoring 2 or 3 touchdowns every single game. And the defense has
Mm-hmm.
even found a way the last few weeks to make a few plays here and there. And that's pretty much all you're going to need when you're scoring over 40 points a game. So Bama looks like the best team in the country, in my opinion. And
No doubt.
I expect to see them in the college football playoff.
Me too. But it's definitely going to be interesting for the committee this year because, what if a team like USC goes undefeated in the Pac-12? What if BYU goes undefeated? A team like Cincinnati, like we said, Texas A&M, they could only have one loss at the end of the year to Bama. So, and of course, you still got games getting canceled too. So it's going to be real interesting to see how it all plays out.
And I think what the committee has shown us is that your resume matters and who you play
Yeah.
matters. So when you got teams like Cincinnati and BYU, they could go undefeated, but I still wouldn't think they're one of the 4 best teams in the country, but simply because of the competition that they face on a weekly basis.
Yeah, but at the same time, you do still have to give them some kind of consideration. But then that just points back to my biggest issue with college football. I think it's become too regionalized. It's pretty much just a southeastern sport at this point. It's just all SEC or nothing.
I mean, they have been dominant. I mean, of recent years, Clemson and Ohio State, they've staked their claims, but they're always among the best in the country. So,
Yeah, because this is also where all the players are. So,
well, we'll see.
no
I
doubt.
think they even talked about delaying the college football playoffs. So, the way
Oh, they'll
COVID
probably have to. Yeah.
and the way COVID has been, it's been a lot of cancellations, especially specifically in the Big Ten. I've seen some
Yep.
SEC cancellations, so it's gonna be interesting to see going forward. How the rest of the season pans out in college football. But
Yeah,
moving
because
on,
yeah, no, I was about to say, I think I saw they're gonna have to already postpone the SEC championship game. So,
it
yeah,
doesn't surprise me.
no doubt.
But moving forward to our next topic here, Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, and on the Rich Eisen show, said the teams were calling out their plays on the line of scrimmage. Quentin, is this a big deal to you?
Looking at it from my perspective, I don't like the fact that he went on the radio interview and said something like that. Excuse me. I think that's something that should be hashed out, internally, player to coach. But I think you have to look at it on both sides. it is the coach's responsibilities to make adjustments. But, at the end of the day, Lamar's going to have to realize the longer he's in the league, defenses are going to catch on to what he's doing because they're pretty much doing the same tendencies and patterns, majority of the plays of a game. If you're running it first down every series and you're throwing it inside the numbers to, Mark Andrews or whoever or Willie Snead or whoever in slot, defenses, of course, are going to stop you. And like I said, Lamar Jackson, at first, he was just so unique and one of a kind. But now everybody has film on him. They've seen him multiple times. So they know all his weaknesses. And now more than ever, those weaknesses are being magnified.
For me, I have a little bit of a different take. So, from what I've been listening to the last few days, that's not uncommon. It's not something that we haven't seen before. But I think therein lies a bigger problem. When you think about, if you just think about the Baltimore Ravens on offense, and so like you said, they are extremely predictable, and defensive coordinators are smart, and they've had time, over the off season to develop game plans and check out tendencies, and players do the same thing. So if on this formation you got Mark Ingram in the game, and they know you're gonna run this play, then they know what to look for. And I think that's the problem. The offense is too predictable. And I think, my biggest issue is the lack of receiving help that he has. You got Mark Andrews, who's one of the best tight ends in the game. But outside of that, I don't think they have a wide receiver that can consistently beat man coverage. That's my biggest issue. If you look around the league, what team outside of Baltimore will Hollywood Brown be the number one on? Maybe Jacksonville.
No, they got
even then, DJ Chark. Exactly. Yeah. And think about on what team will Willie Snead be a number two? I don't know what team. Exactly. That's therein lies the problem. And so when they're throwing the ball, they're trying to throw it through the middle of the field, and teams know that. And Lamar, of course, Lamar has to progress and get better as a passer. We all know that. But receivers also have to get open, too. Hollywood Brown tweeted about, what good is having soldiers if you're not going to use them? Well, your soldiers got to do their job, too. And they're not doing their job. It's your responsibility to get open, and Lamar has to get better with ball placement, things like that. But you're not really helping them out at all.
No.
And think about it.
That goes back to the coaches, too, because it's part of the coach's responsibility, too. If your players can't get open, you got to scheme them open.
Exactly. Lamar Jackson has 12 passing touchdowns, and 7 of them have gone to tight ends. His receivers had the least amount of combined receiving yards last year. So they haven't improved. They haven't improved much. Of course, they have a great stable of running backs. They got 2 good tight ends. But even the offensive line isn't the same from last year. They lost basically a Hall of Fame guard in Marshall Yonder.
Injuries.
Marshall Yonder retired from last year. Like I said, he's basically a Hall of Famer. Ronnie Stanley missed a few games early and then, hurt his ankle a couple weeks ago. They also lost a starting right guard in Tyree Phillips. So this nearly half of your offensive line missing is having to be reshuffled. Now your right tackle is going to left tackle. You got to move somebody else out to tackle. So, the team isn't perfect. And then, you think about the offseason. They added 2 interior defensive linemen. Then they also, at the trade deadline, traded a 3rd-round pick for a pass rusher on an expiring contract. And they already have Matthew Judon on an expiring contract. So all they did was add to a team that was already good on the defensive side of the ball. You didn't give them any help. You saw what Lamar did last year, but you knew teams were going to adjust. So I don't know. I don't understand why they didn't try to get him any help. I'm sure, you heard ramblings about A.J. Brown. You heard about Julio, which neither one of those guys ultimately got traded. My thing is, try to go get Antonio Brown. That was my whole thing. We seen videos of him working out with Lamar Hollywood over summer. Why did you not try to go get AB? You have a great culture. You have a great locker room. Why not bring AB in? He's been a model citizen so far by the Buccaneers from all players and coaches. He's been doing what he's supposed to do. He looks like a changed man, from listening to conversations about Antonio Brown. He is a changed guy. He did what he's supposed to do in the offseason. He got some help. So why not go get Antonio Brown?
Unfortunately, it's probably some people that just got their minds made on what they got their mind made up on what they think about him.
And don't get me wrong, I'm glad they signed Dez Bryant, who's always been one of my favorite players. But
how much is he really gonna offer or bring to the table?
You still don't have a number one receiver. You still don't have a receiver that can consistently beat man coverage. That's my whole thing. They cannot consistently beat man coverage. You cannot win if you cannot beat man coverage. I don't care how great of a team you have. And that's my whole problem with the Baltimore Ravens. And like I said, I've mentioned, I am a huge Lamar Jackson fan. He has to get better. But you also got to give him something to work with outside of a tight end and some running backs. In this league, you do have to throw the ball. And if you think about all the great quarterbacks, they have some dynamic receivers at the very least.
No doubt. I agree with you. He got to get some kind of help out there.
They're going to have to do something in the offseason because I still don't believe they're not going to win the championship. Not like this.
And, even as it shakes up now, they be like, what, the 5 seed? They be playing like at Indianapolis or somebody.
In which, they just beat them last week, of course.
Right.
But
I think before that it was the Titans, which, of course, the Titans still basically kind of neck and neck with them for their division.
Exactly. And they play Tennessee, the following week, next week. So we're going to see. In Tennessee's defense isn't, what it was last season.
It's not good, no.
Exactly. So, we may have some lead with it. We're going to see what they're going to do Sunday night and then the following week. But, it's just like the team is predictable offensively. The defense is great. We know what the defense is, but offensively, you can't be predictive offensively, and that's
I think too. Part of it, you can be predictable because to a certain extent, because what we saw with Lamar and them was you knew what was coming, but because they had the personnel to pull it off, they could just run it at you and you couldn't stop it or do anything about it. But, with those injuries, like you said, you definitely can't ignore how big of a factor that is.
Exactly.
And Lamar said in that interview, too, that, with players being hurt and things like that, he tries to do too much at times. So, in that regard, he also has to tone it down himself.
And like you mentioned, like I said, a retirement here, a few injuries there, and another year we're coordinated. Last year was something that nobody had ever seen.
Yeah.
In terms of running the football, it's something that the league had never seen. The league had never seen the quarterback run the ball that well and also be able to lead the league in touchdowns. It's something the league had never seen. So they had a full offseason. Even though it was a little while, it was a little different. They still had time to prepare and scheme up to stop it. Exactly. So, you had an advantage. Now that advantage is even, but you don't have the same personnel as you had last year. So then it kind of puts you behind. So, they're gonna have to find a way to change some things up and get it done, or they're gonna be out early in the playoffs once again.
But hey, things definitely aren't, completely over because they're still 6-2 right now. So
exactly, and it's crazy. Is we're coming with all of this criticism. We're talking about their faults or whatever, but they're still
a great team. Yeah,
still 6-2. They should be 7-1. They should have beat Pittsburgh. I don't care what nobody say. They dominated Pittsburgh in their game, but exactly. Lamar's 4 mistakes is what gave them the edge. Like, they absolutely dominated Pittsburgh. And me personally, like I mentioned, I'm not really impressed with Pittsburgh. The last 3 games, they haven't played a complete game of football. They played a great half that got them to win, but they haven't played a complete game in 3 weeks. I don't care what nobody says or Steelers fan.
I haven't been impressed with them all season, honestly.
Nope. I think, some seasons, you get luckier than others. And I think this is what,
they had a weak schedule starting up.
They're a great team, obviously, but they're also, there's a lot of luck involved in it too.
Yeah, because they're a very flawed team.
But
But
let's move on to our last topic of the show.
yes,
This is
sir.
our fourth installment of the Give Him His Roses segment, where we recognize a player, a retired player that doesn't get their just due. So, Quinn, who do you got?
All right. Well, this time I switched it up. I went NBA. Previously I had done all football players. So this time I want to show some love to the dream, Hakeem Olajuwon. Hakeem, first I want to, his accolades can't be ignored. He was a two-time champ, two-time Finals MVP, a 12-time All-Star, 12-time All-NBA. Of course, he won league MVP once, two-time Defensive Player of the Year, nine-time All-Defense. A fun stat about him, he averaged 2 steals and 2 blocks on defense for a season 4 different times, and no other player in history has done it more than once. So people have made the argument that he's arguably the greatest defensive center of all time, and you definitely can make the case for him given his resume. But starting in college, he went to University of Houston and put them on the map. He was actually teammates with Clyde Drexler, and they called themselves Phi Slamma Jamma, actually. They made it cool to dunk. And, of course, they went to 2 natties, but unfortunately they couldn't win either one of them. But as soon as he came into the league, he went to the finals in his second year. Of course, the Rockets had him and Ralph Sampson. So they were pretty dominant in the middle. But, of course, they lost to Bird and the Celtics in 6 games in the 85 finals. But Hakeem had 80 or 33 in game one of that series. And, after that, Boston just decided they weren't going to let Hakeem beat him because they made it pretty tough for him. But, a lot of his career was wasted because he had some rough years where he was individually great, but he was in one of those situations where his owner wanted to sell the team. So because of that, there were occasions where they lowballed Hakeem Olajuwon on his contract. So guys like Patrick Ewing, and other elite centers in the league, while they were getting paid, they were taking advantage of Akeem wanting to stay in Houston and, pretty much giving them cheap contracts. But nobody ever hears about that because 94, 95, they repeated back-to-back championships. And you can make the case, which I think it easily is, uh, his 94 season was the best season by a center in NBA history. He was the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Finals MVP, and the champion. And he averaged 27 points a game with 12 rebounds, 3.5 assists, nearly 4 blocks, and a steal and a half. That's just crazy as a center to think that he was doing that. And I didn't even bring up his signature move. Is arguably the most unstoppable. Oh, wait. I'm thinking about Kareem, not Kareem. I'm thinking about, yeah, that's the wrong person. But right after that, I think he significantly declined because he had a knee injury, the 97-98 season at age 35. So he just wasn't really able to recover. So after that, that was pretty much all for his career. But I think they definitely could have gave Michael Jordan some fits if they met in the finals.
Possibly, but yeah,
That would have
I
been a
agree.
good matchup.
I agree with you. Hakeem is criminally underrated. He's one of the most versatile players that the game has ever seen, and
Yeah.
he needs more credit. But for me, I'm going with a wide receiver that played in the 2000s, and I'm going with Derek Mason. Derek Mason, 5'10", 187 pounds out of Michigan State. I actually worked with Derek Mason a couple summers ago at ESPN 102.5 The Game in Nashville. And he was a co-host for the Morning Drive, their morning sports show. But Derek Mason played his career with the Oilers for 1 year, Titans, Ravens, and spent time with the Jets and the Texans. During the 2000s, he was a 2-time Pro Bowler. He was a first-team All-Pro in 2000 as a returner. and he was a Pro Bowler in 2003 as a receiver. And that in and of itself, is a crime. So let me read you a little bit of his numbers: 934 receptions, 12,061 yards, and 66 touchdowns.
He put
And
up some numbers.
That's not all.
I remember him putting up some numbers.
1,590 punt return yards and 2 touchdowns. 3,496 kick return yards and a touchdown. He has over 17,000 all-purpose yards, which ranks 19th in league history. He had 8 1,000-yard seasons in a 9-year span from 2001 to 2009. His last 1,000-yard season came with Baltimore when he was at age 35. He has the most receiving yards in Ravens history.
Man.
And he's had the 6th most receiving yards in the Oilers and Titans history. And if you want to dig deeper into his numbers, his first 3 seasons, he was primarily used as a return man. So he racked up some yards. Basically, he racked up basically like 6,000 yards, in a very short period of time with the Oilers and Titans. And so when you think about all the guys he had to compete with in the 2000s, like I mentioned last week, you got Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison.
It was nasty.
Chad Ochocinco, Torrey
all
Holt,
kinds of talent.
Isaac Bruce, Larry Fitzgerald. And I'm missing. I'm probably missing a bunch of guys. T.O.
Moss.
You had Randy Moss. So you got about 14, 15 top flight receivers that you got to compete with, which would probably explain, the lack of Pro Bowls and all pro selections. But still, Derek Mason, he has Hall of Fame numbers. I'm not sure why he's not already in the Hall, but you know how that, we've seen how that goes. It's very hard for receivers to get in. Yep. Even a guy like T.O. had to wait, and I think that was for other reasons. But you got guys, you got other guys that probably may not ever get in, despite having spectacular numbers. And if you think about the era he played in, he really wasn't. He played in the era where running backs were getting the ball 300. We're having 350 carries. That's the era he played in, and he was still able to rack up, consecutive 1,000-yard seasons like it's nothing. So, shout out to Derek Mason, man. Hopefully, I can get him on the show one of these days. I've been trying to hit him up, but I haven't had any luck. But
yeah, we can definitely use that. But he was definitely underrated.
Shout out to Derek Mason.
Yes, sir. Well, hey, that's all I had.
All right, well, that's all we got for y'all today. Thank y'all for tuning in to episode 33 of the First and Foremost Sports Podcast. I'm Jimmy Covens.
Sir. All right, and I'm the one and only Quinton Douglas.
And we out. Thank y'all.
Deuces.